starting actually in Unit 6, I want to go back to like 1848. Because everything that we talked about in Unit 7 is a reaction to Unit 6. Remember that at the end of Unit 6, this is before 1850. And so people's lives are terrible. The cities are terrible. People's wages are low. And politically, they're still oppressed because even though there were tons of revolutions in 1848, did any of them succeed? No, not really. But it's really these revolutions of 1848 that trigger everything that we talked about in this unit. Because even though they failed, if the people in charge don't do something, then there's a really good chance that what will happen again? There will be revolutions. And next time they might what? They might succeed, right? And then the people in charge, are they going to have a job? No. And as we've said many times, do the people in charge want to be out of a job? No, they want to stay in charge. When you're at the top, you want to stay at the top. And so that sort of fuels what we're talking about. So we started this unit by talking about the cities. We're taking some of these new scientific ideas and we're pairing them with our industrial ability. And we start to remake the cities because the cities are terrible. And so part of that is sewers. You know, we bring in steam shovels and steam powered machinery to install sewers in a lot of these big cities. As we're tearing up the streets, we might as well put in new streets. We might as well put in big, broad boulevards, which, as you know, do a couple of things. They help to enlarge the city. They help to make it a little bit easier to live there. But there's also that political reason of you can't build a barricade across 600 feet of street. It's really hard. And so there are a lot of reasons, but the primary one is just to kind of make life better. And so use the science, use the Industrial Revolution to help people. We also see the advent of middle-class culture. The French Revolution has come and gone, and in the wake of the French Revolution, the middle class is kind of in charge. And you can tell this because middle-class culture begins to spread to all the classes, not just to them. So the working class begins to live life like the middle class. The upper class, they're still kind of in a world of their own because they got a lot of money. So take a look at this picture. We got a family here, right? So why are the people where they are? Why is he out on the sidewalk?
Because he just does.
Coming home, right?
Come down, pick up the kids.
No, well, he probably came home and when she opened the door, the kids probably did what?
Right.
Yeah, they're like, Dad. And so they, he's picked up the kids. She's in the doorway. Very specific and very purposeful placement of the woman. Why is she in the doorway instead of?
Yeah, she stays at home.
Right, this is the boundary, right? This is the border between her sphere and his sphere. And so you see a lot of like romantic art from this period portraying women in the doorway. And you kind of, this imagery kind of comes back again later. But this is to signify that this is the end of her space. This is the end of her place. And beyond that is his. And the kids are allowed to like run out. She's probably been hanging out with the kids all day, maybe instilling those middle-class values, especially maybe on her daughter, but definitely like pressuring her kids to act a certain way, be a certain way, learn, make sure you're succeeding in school, things like that. And so middle-class culture is, again, beginning to permeate the society, and they're the ones who are kind of in charge. When it comes to science, we already talked about how we're applying the Industrial Revolution to make people's lives better in the city. We also get things like Darwinism and social Darwinism, which is implying this idea of survival of the fittest among people, as well as among the natural world. And as you know, that's going to be a really big deal. Do we need to talk any more about social Darwinism? I feel like we've talked it to death, which just means that I'm fitter than it is because it died and I didn't. Sorry, that was a bad joke. We also see science starting to replace religion, and there's a couple of reasons for this. And one, churches are not keeping up, which I think is actually a question in your study guide. Church construction isn't keeping up with movement to the city. You've also got the feminization of church. Men say things like, oh, church is a lady thing. My wife will go to church and she'll take the kids and I won't go, like I'll stay home. And so that's one way that religion can't really compete. But also, science is in a lot of ways beginning to explain the natural world to people. And so that's what religion used to do. We also start to see that science is becoming more and more difficult to understand. People don't really get it, but they know it's good. And if you really think about it, there's kind of like a harmony with a religious idea. Like people who are religious, they have a God that they tend to believe is a beneficial God, a good God, that does good things for people. They don't always understand that God, but it is a good thing. And science is sort of the same. Science is doing good things. People don't really understand how it works, but science is good. Kind of see how that might jive. That's an important point to think about or to remember as we get into World War I and after, is this marrying of or replacement of religion with science. Art. I wanted to backfill a little bit on art in this period. We backfilled, I feel like we kind of caught up on the Ottoman Empire and Russia, but we never really got a chance to talk about art. So this is a good opportunity to talk about middle class and science as it's reflected in the art, because art is doing what it always does. It's reflecting and it's magnifying. And so part of this is the new scientific ideas and part of it is social. But photography is invented during this time period. And so you get pictures like this. This is actually from an American. This is Jacob Riis. But he publishes a book called How the Other Half Lives. And he goes around New York City taking pictures. I'm going to turn this lights off so we can see it. Taking pictures of homeless people and poor people. So that rich people who rarely see this can see how the poorer half lives. And the advent of photography encourages people who are painters to paint more realistic stuff. Realism becomes a thing in the late 19th century. Partly this is a response to Romanticism, which is a lot of fake stuff. Like this is the way the world ought to be. This is the world can be scary sometimes. Stuff like that. Realism is like, this is the world. This is how it is. And so they want to paint realistic stuff, but also people doing real things. So like, here's Mama. She just got back from the grocery store. Looks like her kid, your grandkid maybe, is sleeping up against her shoulder. I don't know if this is maybe mom or if it's just a lady on the train who's breastfeeding next to her. But like, this is life for people. And so on some levels, realism mimics photography. But you've also got things like Impressionism and Post-Impressionism and Pointillism, which are also making use of new scientific ideas about perception. Monet is one. He famously paints water lilies. He also paints haystacks and a bunch of other things. But
Yeah.
Impressionists like to paint outside. They paint really fast. So they glimpse something, they get an impression of it, and then they paint as fast as they can the image that's in their brain. Monet is painting these water lilies at multiple times of the day so that he can experiment with how light is playing off of the water lilies early in the morning, mid-morning, afternoon, evening. And so he's experimenting with light and color as he paints these over the course of a day. You also got guys like Degas and Manet, who we'll see here in a minute, and guys like Seurat. Seurat paints this one. This is a Sunday afternoon on the island of Le Grand Jatte. Anybody ever seen this one, by the way?
Yes.
It's in Chicago, so it's not that far. It's massive too, right? It's like the size of my back wall. It's gigundous. And the amazing thing about this is that there are no lines.
It's done.
Everything is painted with dots. All right. And so he's sort of playing with this new scientific principle of perception. Because there are no lines, all he does is he concentrates certain colors of dots in certain places. And then he lets your brain fill in the gaps. And so he's sort of mimicking this new scientific theory that we're all made of what? Dots. We don't call them dots. We call them what? Atoms, right? We're all made of atoms. Like, you're not really here either. You're just a concentration of a certain kind of atoms in one place. And just like that, like you're not really here, but you are. These people aren't really here, but they are, right? And so again, we're using science to make art. We're also reflecting social commentary. The middle class, right? The liberals are big on capitalism. So we got Manet here, a bar at the Folies Bergeret. And so Manet paints this woman at the bar. When you go to a place that sells things at bars, what do you do at the bar?
You drink.
Well, okay, yes, I can't seem to ask this question right. You buy stuff at the bar, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so anything that's on or behind the bar is supposed to be for sale. Like the drinks, the oranges, these drinks, those bottles in the back. But he's also using the mirror behind the bar to illustrate this idea that, you know, if everything behind the bar is for sale, then, you know, are all these things for sale? Like, did you notice the trapeze artist's feet, by the way? So they're all watching like a trapeze artist do a performance or whatever. But he's suggesting that, like, you know, the performance is for sale. The leisure is for sale. The entertainment is for sale. It's an open secret that many barmaids in Paris would also double as prostitutes. And so she's for sale. So he's kind of saying, like, in a capitalistic society, such as you see in the late 1800s, what is for sale? Everything, right? Everything has a price. Every item, every event, your time, the people, everybody's got a price, is what he's saying with this piece of art. Sunday afternoon on Le Grand Jatte. Let's go back to Seurat. What is Seurat saying about middle-class culture with this picture?
It's pretty leisurely.
There's some leisure,
Like what for?
but even when you're at leisure, how do you dress?
However you want.
Do you?
It looks like.
All the women are like all women. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And this is everybody's kind of like that, right? So in other words, if you want to be middle class, you got to do what?
Be proper.
You got to dress the part. What are they all doing?
Laying down, looking at the lake or whatever it is.
Sure. Almost everybody is looking the same way. So if you want to be middle class, not only do you have to dress the part, you also have to do what?
Meet social expectations.
You have to act the part, meet social expectations, right? If you want to be middle class, conform,
Yeah, that's what.
look like us, act like us, be like us. Now there are exceptions, right? This little woman here, or this little girl here, she's a kid, right? She'll learn. This guy here playing the trombone, he's not, he's working, right? He's hustling for change. So he's not middle class. He gets to look the other way. This woman here, she's a prostitute.
The one in the blue dress?
The one in the blue dress. I know she's a prostitute because she has a pet monkey.
Oh.
And
Signify.
so the monkey signifies prostitution. So like, remember that painting we looked at with the woman at the train station, had the little puppy in her lap? Well, dogs signify loyalty and faithfulness, and monkeys symbolize prostitution. I wish, it sounds like I'm making this up. Like, it sounds fake, but that's totally a thing. I'm not making it up.
Is it because like the monkeys are found like in the bars for entertainment or something?
I really have no idea. I have no idea, but monkeys tend to signify prostitution. But she's allowed to be here. Why is she allowed to be here? Even though, I mean, she's got a monkey on a string. Everybody knows she's a prostitute. Why is she allowed to be here?
Because she's a hater.
She acts and looks and is being like them.
Yeah, she's conformed in every other way. And so because outwardly she conforms, she can be there with everybody else. And so again, this middle-class culture is permeating the whole society. Let's flip over to politics real quick. I'm going to turn the lights back on. This is a quick recap of the revolutions of 1848. These are the 3 reasons that people revolted in 48. Now, again, did the 48 revolution succeed? No, but they are a warning shot. The conservatives know that if they don't do some of this, then they're not going to have control anymore. So we had nationalist revolutions. People wanted to unify or separate with their nation. We had liberal revolutions. People wanted equality and rights written in a constitution. And we had socialist revolutions. Workers who want the government to help them because life is hard. And all of these were reasons why people revolted in 48. And in the unit that we just went through from 1850 to 1914, many of these things happen, but who makes them happen? The revolutionaries or the governments?
Government.
A lot of this stuff is top down. The governments step in and do a lot of these things. And these are some of the things that we talked about in Unit 7. That showed us that the government was listening. Even though 48 failed, the governments were listening. Because we have unity in Italy and Germany. We're going out, we're fighting and winning foreign wars. By the way, for number 8 on your study guide, the one that says compare and contrast the methods used to unify Italy and Germany. What I would do is I would go back to those homeworks. There was one on Italy and France, and there was one on the unification of Germany. And what I did is I just wrote down two columns, one for Italy, one for Germany, and they each have about 4 or 5 or 6 events in them. I started at the beginning, just went down to the bottom, went to the end of the unification process, and then when I saw similarities, I drew lines to help me see what was similar and what was different.
Can you find what the socialist revolution, so it's one more time?
I didn't get it.
Workers want the government to help them.
Thank you.
And so, again, for nationalism, we see unity, we see symbols, we see public schools teaching nationalistic ideas to children. We also see the government's working really hard to try to connect the government to the nation. If you support the government, the nation will be strong. If you don't support the government, then you're weakening the whole nation. Now, is that true? Do you have to support the government to support the nation?
No.
No. Right? What if the government's terrible? If you support it, then that's going to bring the nation down, right? But these governments are working hard to make sure that people think that supporting one is supporting the other. Liberalism, we grant universal male suffrage and constitutions. This is also a great way to listen to the people so that you can avoid future revolution. And socialism, right? The workers wanted help, so the governments give them old age pensions, health insurance, and accident insurance. This is helping people out. Russia, the Ottoman Empire, and Austria are not going to do these things. As you know, they can't be nationalists because they'll fall apart. And they don't do these other things because they're conservative. And so what you're going to see is after World War I, there's not going to be a Russia or an Ottoman Empire or an Austrian Empire. They're all going to disappear after World War I because they're failing.
Doesn't Russia become like USSR after World War?
Yeah, we'll talk about that later. Side effects. These are the side effects of those 3 things. Nationalism, the side effect is social Darwinism and racism, intense competition and imperialism, which we'll talk about next. Liberalism, you give all the men rights. What are the women going to want?
Right.
Rights, right? And so we see the suffragettes, women who want the right to vote. You gave all the men the right to vote. Now the ladies want their right to vote as well. And then socialism, we start to see this split between the radical Marxists and the more moderate socialist revisionists who want slow change through political action. Here's the definition for imperialism, for those of you who wanted that definition. So nationalism encourages imperialism. And imperialism is the extension of a nation's authority over other nations or areas politically through conquest or economically. And in the second imperialism, politically through conquest would be like Africa, whereas economically would be like South America and the imperialism of free trade. And a lot of this is the industrial countries taking over non-industrial countries. The industrial countries have the tools to dominate these other people. Do industrial countries want non-industrial countries to industrialize?
No.
No, because if they do, then what do you get?
More competition.
You get competition, right? And so they don't want industrialization to spread if they can help it. At first, it's mostly just Britain. In the middle of the 1800s, it's mostly just Britain, which is why you get this devilfish in Egyptian waters. The English can pretty much just take over whatever they want because everybody else is still either industrializing or fighting over Europe. And so England employs its secret weapon, a man-headed octopus, to take over all these things. Also, I'm pretty sure that, like, when I close my eyes at night, this is the nightmare I see. Like someday a man-headed octopus is going to crawl out from under my bed and just like suck out my brain or something. I don't know how it attacks, but it's terrible. You know it's true. Excuse me. All right, for the second imperialism, the new imperialism, Remember the first one was the Americas. The second one, this is really it kicks off with the scramble for Africa. 1880 to 1900, we see all the European powers be like, hey, the British got all these colonies. We gotta get some before they're all gone. And so the entire continent joins in the colonization of Africa and Asia and begins to ruin those people's lives. They use those industrial tools to make that happen, right? We did this graphic organizer on the tools of imperialism. Why are they doing that? We talked about 6 different motives for imperialism in this graphic organizer that we finished yesterday. We talked about the white man's burden for our bell ringer. One big difference that I want to point out is that in the second imperialism, aside from like geography, like it's just in a different place, there are also a lot fewer Europeans involved. Now, there's a lot of different reasons for that. Mostly it's because, you know, the natives in Africa don't die off like the natives in America. But it's also, they just don't have the people. And so what they do instead, in order to use fewer people, they typically try to use the existing political structure to run the country. And so they'll keep the African ruler or the Asian ruler in charge and then just bribe them or influence them to make things happen that they want to have happen. Sure. And so that way they can just simply influence one person instead of having to control the entire population. I kind of see it like the Wizard of Oz. The Europeans are like the man behind the curtain. Does that make sense? And then the giant floating head, that's like the African or Asian who's still in charge. Does that check out? Okay. That's how it makes sense to me. Do the people want to be colonized? No, they don't. And so they fight. They work slow. They rebel. They argue about liberalism. Does it work? Not really. Not yet. Not yet. And then you've got, you do have some anti-imperialists in Europe who are arguing against all this. All right, friends. That's it.